Mets'd fans, you're in for a special one. Today is the big reliever episode that I know you guys have all been waiting for. Every single year, me and James deep dive into the reliever market, the Mets bullpen, what it's going to look like, what we're going to see. We did it, weirdly enough, about a year ago to the day. Complete accident. So we're ripping relievers again. There is a little bit of housekeeping stuff before we do get going into this, of course, involving Pete Alonso. We heard that Pete Alonso's camp went to the New York Mets, told them, we'll take a 3-year deal with player options. I mean, James, this is what we knew was going to happen the entire time. He's going to sign with the Mets. This really isn't even like news besides the fact that it just seems we're getting closer and closer to Pete crumbling and just being like, I'll do whatever you guys say.
Don't jinx anything. Don't say it. I mean, I hope it happens. We thought it was going to happen. Yeah, getting closer. The report was also corroborated by Will Salmon. We still also don't really know what that means. Like, what if Pete Alonso asked for a 3-year, $130 million contract?
That's fair. I'm
saying, like, what if he asked for, like we could have done that, like, because the whole report was like he came to the Mets with a short-term deal that's only for the Mets. Like, what if it's like, I'll take a short-term deal, but I'm still going to bend you over the barrel. So we don't know. We don't know all the details. It was corroborated, though, and we just hope that this comes to a conclusion really, really soon.
Yeah, it would be nice to have Pete Alonso penciled into that lineup, at least for the upcoming season, and hopefully for a few more afterwards.
Yeah, you didn't even do any intro stuff. You realize that, right?
Yeah, I realize that. I wanted to go into it quickly because now that people have heard all the interesting stuff that they wanted to hear about, you should be subscribed to the YouTube channel. You haven't hit the sub button yet on this thing. Half of you aren't subscribed. Click the subscribe button. Does help us out. I mean, we've been doing you guys have been incredible on the support, so we appreciate it. Keep it up. And if you are listening to us, you want to listen in your car, you want to listen at work, you don't want to watch us, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, drop us a rating, drop us a review, and most importantly, download the podcast and subscribe to the podcast feed. So, like I said, this is going to be our reliever episode. We're going to go through the Mets bullpen, what we think they should do, what they've got, where we're going. Where do you want to start first, James?
I think I want to start off with, I think, where a lot of people want us to start, but it's not going to be what a lot of people want to hear. Just rip off this Band-Aid. Tanner Scott's not going to be a Met. There's probably a less than 0.1% chance that the Mets give Tanner Scott what looks like it's going to become possibly a 3 or 4 year deal between $50 and $20 million a year AAV, which I can't really see this happening. There's a lot of teams in this market. There's a lot of teams that need a closer. Like, I'm starting to get into some fantasy baseball drafts, starting to get that going, and trying to navigate the closer market's crazy because Tanner Scott, who's truthfully one of the best relievers in baseball, doesn't have a team. So there's one team's closer situation that's just going to have like a bomb dropped on it at some point. Like, he really elevates the Cubs. He'd really elevate the Orioles. Like, there's a lot of teams. I mean, I don't think the Orioles are going to sign him. I'm saying there's a lot of teams that like could definitely use a closer, and the Mets, while they could definitely use another back-end reliever, there's almost no way, shape, or form that becomes Tanner Scott.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody knows that Tanner Scott, talent-wise, like, we'd love Tanner Scott on the Mets. This is not us saying we don't want Tanner Scott as the player, because he is just simply one of the best left-handed relievers, one of the best straight-up relievers in Major League Baseball. The guy was disgusting last year. The stuff is insane. I know he's like weirdly had struggles against the Mets in the past when he was on the Marlins because he doesn't really throw strikes that much, but the K rate was unbelievable. Nobody hits the ball hard off of him. He is an incredibly talented relief pitcher. It's just that at a multi-year deal for a reliever on a team that's already paying their closer $20+ million a year for the next few seasons, there's absolutely no reason, no way David Stearns all of a sudden does this unless some reason he becomes like, I actually don't give a shit. We need to win a World Series right now. Do whatever it takes.
Then again, like I still can't see David Stearns, given his entire history and even given like with the Brewers and also his history in this 2 years with the Mets, giving a reliever a 4-year contract in general. Just like simply speaking, good teams, winning teams, good organizations don't really ever do this. Like, it's not good value because you're paying a lot of money for not a lot of innings. You're paying $20 million for 60 innings. Like $3 million an inning. That's a bad deal. It's a very bad deal in terms of what a pitcher should give you. And it's just a really high bust rate. Like, there was the contract signed on Friday night, Jeff Hoffman to the Blue Jays. And it was a pretty lucrative deal. It was like 3 years, $30-ish million, right? 3 years, $36 million, something like that.
336 or 4 for 40. It's around that range. I mean, it doesn't really matter that much. But yeah, he was making about $10 million a year.
Yeah, and it's in the same breath, it was reported that he was originally going to sign with the Orioles, but they nixed the deal because of shoulder issues that came up in his physical. So shout out the Blue Jays for, I saw us on Twitter stealing the joke, but still coming in second for a free agent, but actually winding up signing him. And also the fact that in the same offseason, the Blue Jays let Jordan Romano walk, who would have been like a 1 year, $12 million, $13 million guy. So they're giving more years to a reliever who was basically a non-roster invite 2 years ago. We love Jeff Hoffman on this podcast. He pitched amazing for the Phillies, the NLCS. We'll never forget all the heroics of Jeff Hoffman against NLDS, against the Mets this year in the playoffs. But you're giving a guy who's a non-roster invite 16 months ago the guaranteed 3-year deal for basically same AAV as a guy that you let walk out the door for a 1-year deal, which I don't know. Like, I see those deals happen. And also, just I said this on a podcast a few months ago. I just want to say it again. Good teams that win the World Series, never ever pay relievers a significant amount of money. I have a list right now of the last 7 World Series winners, and their top paid reliever, they paid nothing. This past year, Dodgers, it was Joe Kelly for $8 million.
And he wasn't even on the roster in the World Series.
That's what I'm saying. He's a free agent right now, and no one's looking at him. 2023, the Rangers, Chris Martin was their highest paid reliever.
That one hurt, by the way.
That one hurt.
Signing for $5 million hurt because that guy's been fantastic.
For like a decade now, Chris Martin just shows up with his hard hat and goes to work. 2022, the Astros, Ryan Presley, $10 million. He's definitely available in trade talks. When they won the World Series, he's only $10 million reliever. They also paid Hector Neris $8 million that season. 2021 with the Braves, Will Smith, he's the highest paid guy in this list at $13 million. He was like the 4th highest paid guy in that team because the Braves have their witchcraft voodoo stupid magic. Chris Martin was also on that Braves team. He made $7 million. So that was 2 relievers in that Braves bullpen that would equal what Edwin Diaz will make this year for the Mets. 2019, the Nationals, their highest paid reliever was Sean Doolittle at $6 million, but everyone remembers Patrick Corbin becoming their best reliever that World Series, and Daniel Hudson rising from the dead to be their closer after years of like his arm being broken. 2018, the Red Sox, Craig Kimbrell, $13 million, matched the Will Smith contract from 2021 with the Braves. That Braves team had a lower payroll than the 2018 Red Sox team, so Will Smith had the highest percentage of his team's total payroll of any guy in this list, where Kimbrell was second, also with $13 million. And 2017, the Astros, I didn't even remember this guy was on this team. Luke Gregerson, $6 million.
Whoa, Luke Gregerson, that's a name.
Right?
And
that's a name.
And when we start talking about 2017, that's like just when teams started really to get smart.
I think that was when the analytics revolution kind of reached basically every single team rather than just a select few of them. So that's kind of why I wanted to cut it off there. And also, I didn't really want to go back to 2015, 2016, just for obvious reasons.
No.
I didn't want to look back at those teams that was years in those rosters. But just basically, the crux of this is that the teams that climbed the mountain at the end of the year, they don't pay relievers very much money at all. So the fact that the Mets already have the highest paid reliever in baseball, Edwin Diaz, it's so unlikely to me that they add the second or third highest paid reliever in baseball, what Tanner Scott will be in a month's time.
Yeah, and that $15-20 million again could be used on so many things. It could be used on so many relievers. It can be used on maybe a big power hitting first baseman. Like, that money could be better used elsewhere. And if you think Tanner Scott is the difference maker for this New York Mets team, you're crazy. You're insane. He's a great reliever, but Tanner Scott's not the difference between this team being a National League East winner and being where they are right now, unlike a guy like Pete Alonso, which is where all the money should be focused right now.
It would definitely help, though. I'm not saying that getting Tanner Scott would make this team worse. Like, if there's any team that could benefit a lot from Tanner Scott, the Mets are on the top of that, near the top of that list. Not the top because he still wouldn't be the best reliever in the bullpen, but like having like a sick 1-2 punch with Edwin Diaz and Tanner Scott would be cool. But I just don't think it's worth $40 million. Again, I think the biggest reason the Mets are not going to make a move for Tanner Scott is because we still pay Edwin Diaz more money than any reliever in baseball, and Edwin Diaz is still sick as fuck. He's still incredible. Like, a lot of people are like, oh, Edwin's falling off. Like, we have to make sure we get Tanner Scott. First of all, Tanner Scott is also 30 years old. So it's not like Tanner Scott's like a spring chicken here. Like, we're getting an era of promise here with Tanner Scott. It could fall off quickly. And again, Edwin is still, we have to take away what happened in the early summer last year, May and June, get rid of it from our minds. Edwin Diaz is still one of the best relief pitchers in baseball. Like, that's still a weapon that we have. We're still paying him more than any other relief pitcher in baseball, too.
Dude, MLB Network did not have him as a top 10 reliever in baseball right now, which I thought is just absolutely insane. Because, listen, I'm here for the Edwin Uceda love because he was discussing last year for the Rays, but I think they had him at like 5, and Edwin Diaz wasn't on the list. I'm like, are we just looking at ERA? And based on my reliever ranking videos, yes, people only look at ERA, and they can't rationalize the idea of how a reliever's ERA is so complete bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, especially a guy like Edwin Diaz, who last year still struck out nearly 40% of hitters he faced. He gave up a lot of like kind of bullshit contact that wound up coming around, especially when he gave a lot of home runs. Similar thing that happened to him in 2019, but all the projections right now that are out, the Steamer projections still have him as one of the 3 to 5 best relievers in baseball. And it's just, we kind of have to erase, again, what happened last year in May and June, and then also just those 2 really horrible blown saves in August. Those are really bad. And the Braves game, I guess.
He was coming back from a major knee surgery. This was all off of not pitching for an entire year. A healthy spring training for Edwin Diaz in 2025, hopefully, going into the season healthy. Like, there's no reason he can't go back to being that guy who's striking out like 45-50% of the batters he faced a couple years ago.
The fact that he was still around 40 last year, one of the highest strikeout rates in all of baseball, is crazy. Because, again, no one's talking about him in that way. People think that this guy is someone that's not like on the upper echelon of relievers in the league anymore. And he absolutely is. That's the only reason I can even stomach the fact he's going to make $20 million this year. Again, more than any other reliever in baseball this year. I was looking at the reliever contracts on Spotrac before, and it was like Edwin Diaz, Josh Hader, Taijuan Walker. So because he's a reliever now. So that's kind of just, that's where it's at. That's who these relievers are getting paid that big money.
And strikeouts are king at the end of the day when you're talking, especially about relievers. Strikeouts. As good as Emmanuel Clase was in the regular season, it was disgusting. He couldn't get strikeouts in the postseason. It cost the Cleveland Guardians the series against the Yankees.
That doesn't make Emmanuel Clase a bad reliever either.
No.
I feel he's still a sensational, incredible
he's
reliever.
awesome.
He's undoubtedly, I think, right now probably the best or second best reliever in baseball. Him or Mason
I'd put him
Miller.
at one. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's just Edwin Diaz can do things that other players can't. And that's a reason that while I think a lot of Mets fans are a little bit worried about this bullpen going into the season, I'm saying that he's still a reason for confidence. You still have a guy at the back end that we can trust indefinitely.
I'm going to say this too. Like, he's so great. We also have like two other, I think, criminally underrated relievers in this grand scope of Major League Baseball between Danielle Nunes and Reed Garrett. Now, to start with Danielle, your boy, the fireman, it was a very small sample, but what he did in that sample, he is simply one of the 15, 20 best relievers in the entire game.
Easily. And it was small, but it was 35 innings. Like, that's not nothing. Like, he there were a couple months this summer where Danielle Nunes came into a game, you were like, thank God Danielle Nunes is coming into a game. Truthfully, there's always been a part of me in the back of my mind thinking back to 2024 Mets that Danielle Nunes didn't get hurt. Like, we might have won the World Series.
I could
like that to me, that was like truthfully on the table. And like, it was disgusting. It was almost a 40% strikeout rate. It was less than a 6% walk rate, a 2.3 ERA, a 0.91 whip. And that, like, those were all some of the best numbers in the league for guys who pitched at least 30 innings this year. So even when you take other guys who also didn't have as big of a sample, he was still sick as hell. And all that's backed up by amazing stuff by Danielle, like a blazing fastball, a sick gyro slider that drops kind of like more like a curveball because it just falls down so much. Like, it's disgusting. Everything that he did is backed up by stuff. And I think he's one of He truthfully right now might be going through the offseason, and we still need the health. He has never really been able to put it together like this, like did last year. But if he can put together like a 60-inning season, he could be one of the most valuable relievers in baseball, truthfully.
And on top of that, Reed Garrett was awesome. I know his numbers kind of fluctuated too, but like beginning of the year, again, talk about saving a season. He might have turned it around against the Detroit Tigers in that doubleheader that day when he came out and gave us some length. Like, Reed Garrett, by no means am I like bottom 9, 2 outs, bases loaded. Who am I going to? I'm not calling Reed Garrett's number. I don't feel the most safe with that. But like, as our third, fourth, fifth option in a bullpen, like, that would be great. And really, as of right now, he is kind of that third option for what we're looking at in that Mets bullpen. He's really good. And he's still, like, with Jeremy Hefner in the pitching lab, like, he's gotten better and better. We saw him in 2023 with the Mets. There was some stuff we saw him at the games. We're like, oh, he's got a little heat to his fastball. He's got a splitter. 2024, he got better. I'm really interested to see what improvements he makes going into 2025 now. Yeah,
Garrett's also a guy who weirdly I feel like fit this something we talked about Trevor May, where it's relievers sometimes are not as scared to walk batters. I think as some fans are scared when relievers start walking batters. Because a guy like Reed Garrett, who strikes out third of the batters he faces, he just kind of mixes it up and throws a lot of junk all around the zone. He had one of the highest walk rates of any reliever in the league. That was the kind of thing that held him back. That whip kind of elevated. That's how he did get into some trouble in the second half of the season. But if he could just kind of manicure that command a little bit, figure out that pitch mix a little bit, understand when to feature his fastballs and when to not. Because one of the things I loved so much about Garrett last year was that he was pitching backwards. Like that when he kind of jumped on the scene, I was like, holy shit, this guy's doing things no one else in baseball is doing because it's just splitters and sliders over and over again. Eventually the league caught back up and he had to adjust and readjust to play the cat and mouse game. But if he can just maneuver this pitch mix a little bit and find ways to get his fastball through, because fastball does have some zip. It's just sometimes I think I think it just also gets hit hard. He's a little bit more scared to throw in certain situations. So if he can just find a way to know when to use it, know when not to, he's still missing tons of bats with the off speeds. As one of the setup men in a bullpen, like I know it's not sexy and it's not like the most fun thing in the world, but as a three-headed, I'm not going to call it a three-headed monster, but as like a group of three at the back of a bullpen, there's many, many worse bullpens on contenders in Major League Baseball right now than Diaz, Garrett, and Nunes. I think that's something that is being underscored a little bit by Mets fans, while also understanding after these guys, the bullpen is truthfully a clusterfuck still.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a clusterfuck, but that's where David Stearns thrives. This is like he thrives in this bullpen chaos because even if you look at some of his most successful teams, like the 2018 Brewers, you start naming some of the relievers in this bullpen and you're like, huh? Like who's throwing? Like he had Jeremy Jeffress out there, Dan Jennings, Taylor Williams was out there. I'm not going to ever vouch for Jacob Barnes coming back to the team, but Jacob Barnes gave the Brewers 50 innings of 3.3 ERA in 2018. Like, he will find a way. Fat Matt Alberts gave him 34 innings. It wasn't good, but he pitched 34 innings. Like, he is going to find guys like he did last year with the Mets, with Phil Maton, even though in the playoffs he was terrible, but regular season he did some really good stuff for the Mets. Ryan Stanek, he's going to be able to find those guys. And just as he said last year, and as he's probably going to say again this year, the bullpen at the beginning of the year is probably going to look nothing like it does at the end of the year. And as long as you make it to the end and you're better off, who cares?
And that's the best part about that. He is open-minded about this bullpen because, again, when you look at the best teams in baseball, they're open-minded about their bullpens. Like, if you watch the Dodgers this year, the guy who was pitching the biggest outs in their bullpen towards the end of the season were two guys who were kind of afterthoughts a few years ago. One was Evan Phillips, who was a bit of a reclamation project, who kind of came as just like a stuff guy out of nowhere with a great fastball and a slider. And then really it was Blake Trinan, who was a pure reclamation project, who came from the depths of hell after a couple of years of not pitching, horrible injuries, and then coming back and just going crazy sweeper, crazy sweeper, crazy sweeper, and over and over again. Like, that's kind of the open-mindedness that you need when you're going to assemble a bullpen that's going to succeed in the playoffs. And again, having Edwin Diaz at the back of it puts the Mets at a huge advantage over every other team in baseball. And you look at the rest of the guys in this bullpen, like just trying to get like an overarching view of who's in there right now.
We have three that are for sure in there between Danielle, Reed Garrett, Edwin Diaz. Those guys will be on the team as long as healthy.
Those guys are full locks, and that will probably, I think, we'll talk about some of the free agents, some of the trade guys available a little bit, but I think there's a really good chance like that, though, that's the closer and setup man as we go into opening day. But then past that, we have guys who are going to have a good shot to make this team mostly because they're out of options. That's Jose Budo, who we don't know what his role is going to be, but he was really good at times in the bullpen last year. He's going to be stretched as a starter, so we're going to see what happens. But he's out of options. So if he's on the team, he's on the team. And then Sean Reed-Foley, who we've all seen flash, but he just can't seem to stay healthy. Danny Young's under contract. He's right now the only lefty, I think, on the 40 man, I want to say. Maybe one of 2 or 3 lefties in the 40 man, but he's the one who's out of options. So I think he'll be the lefty on opening day. Dylan Covey, who we've talked about before, seems like he'll be, and same with Griffin Canning. These guys seem like they'll be more in the starter-reliever line. Like, they're going to have the opportunities to start, and we'll see how they wind up as relievers. And then you have the rest of the relievers in the 40-man roster. You have Tyler Zuber, who I think is kind of fun. He's been really good with Mets fans on Twitter. If you guys haven't seen him on Twitter yet, definitely throw him a follow because he's sharing a lot of the work he's done this offseason. And he has one of the craziest pitches in all of baseball. He has like a rising sweeper, like a sweeper that, like, it's a bizarre pitch. We post a lot of videos of it. It's really, really cool. And he can get the fastball up to 97 miles an hour. So I think he's a lot of fun. Then we have favorite of always, Huascar Brazoban, and then Kevin Herget, Max Kranick, and Justin Hageman, other guys who are on the 40-man roster, but probably more for length than guys who are actually going to be able to mix in ever as an impact reliever.
I'll never forget when Huascar Brazoban got traded to this team and just hearing like other people in the world talking about Huascar Brazoban, one, not knowing his age, not having a clue that he was in his mid-30s, and two, talking about him as if he was like this guaranteed going to be this huge guy getting big outs for the Mets in big games. He got sent down within a couple weeks. Like the whole thing was him was like free controllable reliever who throws like 97. We'll take it. We'll try him out.
Yeah, as long as we don't DFA Huascar Brazoban, there's a good chance he retires as a New York Met. Like,
definitely.
Like, he's going to become a forever Met these next few years. So you get used to Huascar Brazoban. Just because he's on the 40-man roster, he has a good changeup, and then he just has tons of options. And then after that group of guys, that's probably the mix. Those like 9 or 10 names I just gave, that's likely going to be the guys who are in this Major League bullpen, besides any other signings we make for the next month or two. Then we have the glob of chaos, and I love the glob of chaos. The glob of chaos is how we found Reed Garrett. The glob of chaos is how we found Danielle Nunes. Like, this is how you kind of look up in August. You're like, who the hell is Oliver Ortega? Why is he getting big outs right now?
Dude, shout out to the Giants because they took Danielle from us in the Rule 5 one year, and then they didn't use him, so we got him back. So he really is a glob of chaos.
But the glob of chaos is Genesis Cabrera, Anthony Ghost, Genesis Cabrera, he's a lefty who throws 96, but the curveball has been very, very best at the sticky stuff, and that was always his best off-speed pitch. Anthony Ghost, Mike King, legend. Originally almost traded to the Mets with Noah Syndergaard in 2011, but he was an outfielder. He changed to become a pitcher. He was trying to get his feet under him. He's still a lefty that throws 96 with a nasty slider, so that's a cool story. He's also a hoss. If you guys see Anthony Ghost, the guy's a brick. He's a monster.
He was a huge prospect outfielder, so he's a freak.
Huge prospect outfielder. Now he throws 96 from the left side in his mid-30s. Chris Stavinsky, once upon a time, he had one of the best changeups in the league. That's not true anymore. Oliver Ortega, I just shouted him out. He's a weird one. I learned about him like only a few hours ago. I didn't even know the Mets signed him, but looking at some videos, he sits 96. He's got a good slider. He's got an okay curve. He missed all of last year with a couple different small elbow surgeries. It was a bone spur. It was a loose body, things like that. But he's another guy who I'm just like, I don't know. I watch some videos like, this guy has some stuff. And then, of course, also Grant Hartwig. He's still technically in the glob of chaos. He has options. He's not on the 40-man roster, but he's still puttering around down there in Syracuse.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. He's puttering around in Syracuse. Yeah, I mean, like, there's Mets fans are going to the new people to this podcast are like, I can't even believe these guys are talking about these relievers right now. And this is like exactly what we love, because this is the glob of chaos. This is the fun stuff, because the Mets are going to have big names at all these other positions. But how can we, like, the reason the Mets can have some of those big names too is because you can use some of these cheap free guys you've never heard of in your bullpen, because you really don't need to pay your seventh reliever any amount of money besides the league minimum. So these guys, as weird as it sounds, some of them will be getting outs for the Mets this year. Some of them will be getting big outs for the Mets this year. Not the biggest, but they'll be getting big outs in the sixth inning of a game against the Milwaukee Brewers maybe at some point. It's fun, because this is what separates, and you said at the beginning, the good teams from the great teams. Being able to find how to make your 25th, 26th, 24th man on this roster a valuable asset to your team. And something we've preached on this podcast since we started. This was a huge problem that previous Mets organizations had. They had 25 men on the roster. They had about 18 guys, and then the rest of them, they were like, whatever, we'll figure it out. Like, we just simply have to roster people. Now the Mets look like they're trying to maximize their spots as much as possible.
Even past that, it's the 39th and 40th guys in the 40-man roster. The guys who are maybe even not even on the 40-man roster. The guys who are going to shuffle up and down. Like, I'm confident that one of the four members of the glob of chaos I just named, between Genesis Cabrera, Anthony Gose, Chris Davinsky, and Oliver Ortega, one of those guys getting a big out in July. I literally guarantee it. I can't. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I think that past that, well, we love the glob of chaos. I think David Stearns will keep adding to the glob of chaos, just more non-roster invites, just get as many bodies as you can in spring training. But I would be shocked if we go into the offseason without signing one or two more major league contracts to relievers.
Yes.
And the best part about that is that there's still so many relievers that are available. Barely half of the available relievers have signed deals. Tanner Scott, the best reliever, again, we talked about at the top of the show, he still has not gone yet. This reliever market really hasn't moved. And truthfully, I'm not even exaggerating, I'm not even trying to be a jerk. There's probably 10 to 15 interesting names of guys out there that we can sign for 1 or 2 year deals for like $8 or fewer million a year, and who will, again, be guys who I can be confident will get us big outs in July, August, September, and hopefully October.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest names, and I spoke with this with Wardy on his channel the other day, name that he was bringing up, David Robertson, is still available. Do we know who can pitch in New York? And he's been great the last 2 years. I mean, remember when he took over for Edwin Diaz when he blew out his knee? Like, awesome. He was awesome. The Mets season would have really been over if they didn't have David Robertson. So the number one guy on my list right now in terms of relievers I think can actually make a difference on this team, I think it starts and ends with David Robertson.
I think so too. And the big thing with David Robertson is that first of all, the curveball is still tremendous. The cutter is still fantastic. And this past year, and when he pitched the whole season, I'm pulling up his age, 39 years old. He turned 39 in April. He'll be 40 by the time this next season really gets going. He has highest strikeout rate in 7 seasons.
Yep.
It's like literally since he was like in his early 30s, and he's still kind of like one of like a regular all-star caliber reliever. Like, he's still tremendous. I love that he has experience in the back end, because I know that, again, we're very high on Danielle Nunes and Reed Garrett. It'd be really nice to have one more veteran that we could really trust in the 7th and 8th innings on most nights, and we could then kind of be able to weaponize Garrett and Nunes more for like pick their spot, come in with guys on base, get out of the beginnings. Robertson, to me, I agree with you, especially because he's so old. He's probably going to be a 1-year deal. He's so high on my list of a guy I really, really want in this bullpen. Someone I would trust a lot with the 8th inning and opening.
And I know Mets fans want a left-handed reliever so badly, a name that can get out the lefties in the division, right? We have Kyle Schwarber, Bryce Harper, Matt Olson. James Wood is going to be a guy that we're going to need to get some lefties to face at some point. David Robertson owns left-handed batters. Last year, he faced almost the same amount of lefties as he did righties in 66 games, and they hit 145 with a 460 OPS against them. Left-handed batters against David Robertson, who's a right-handed pitcher. That cutter's disgusting. It's really hard for lefties to adjust to. You can kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone there and have a guy who can get both out, which I know is something that you, James, you always talk about, like, that's an issue for a lot of pitchers. You can only really get one side of the plate out. David Robertson's doing it against both.
That's one of my favorite things also about Reed Garrett and Danielle Nunes. Like, they're very, very platoon independent, where especially Danielle, because he has that slider that's basically a death ball. It's just like a straight up and down pitch. You're not really getting a platoon advantage either side of the plate against that. And Reed Garrett with the splitter too. Like, that's I think one of the reasons that the Mets haven't really prioritized getting a high leverage, high level lefty out of this bullpen yet. I think that's why some people are really clamoring for Tanner Scott. But I think David Stearns has done a great job of being able to avoid that problem, being able to kind of face it in a different way, especially with 3 batting minimum. Like, having a lefty that can only get lefties out doesn't help
really
at all.
No.
It's really not good at all. Like, Tim Hill was a great lefty reliever for the Yankees. He's on this list too of guys I would take on the Mets next year. it's a little difficult sometimes for him against good right-handed batters. Like we saw the Yankees get in trouble in the postseason trying to match up and game plan with Tim Hill because it just doesn't line up as well for a guy like him as it would for some other lefties who are a little bit more platoon neutral, or righties who are just platoon neutral, like the Mets luckily have a lot of.
Yeah, no, and you've seen who the Mets have gone after so far in the David Stearns era as well with left-handed relievers. Like he's going to take shots rather than guys who have had the numbers already.
Totally. I think Robertson is the one guy who I think we both agree on who has the numbers already, who makes a lot of sense because of the New York experience, late inning experience, again, platoon neutral curveball and cutter, and then just the fact that he's still awesome and only going to want a one-year deal. Two other guys who I think would make a lot of sense for this, two guys who've also been in the Mets within the last year, Ryan Stanek and Brooks Raley.
Yeah.
I think we both would really welcome reunions with one, if not both of those guys. Stanek really ingratiated himself with Mets fans in the postseason. That bailed me out badly. Because that was my guy. A year ago, I was telling you guys how much I wanted Ryan Stanek on this team, and then he sucked ass for a month after we traded for him, and people were killing me. And then all of a sudden, you're like, oh, this is now our second most trusted reliever in the NLCS. James, you might have been right there. But Stanek is another guy, righty that's platoon neutral because he's got the fastball that gets up on hitters, he's got the tight slider, and he's got the splitter or curve that falls down. I can't really remember right now in Stanek, but Raley's another guy who he gets lefties out, but he doesn't miss anything as righties either. It's a splitter with Stanek. How could I forget it's the Stanek splitter? But those are two guys who have experience with the Mets. I think the thing with Stanek is he's probably out there looking for a 3-year deal. He pitched so well in the playoffs. He might be pricing himself out of the Mets, but every single day that goes by is one day closer to these guys signing 1 and 2 year deals, which is exactly what David Stearns wants.
Yeah, the one thing I wonder with Brooks Raley is maybe the arm is a little further behind than where we thought, just because it seems like it would make so much sense for him to just take a 1-year deal with the Mets, figure it out, and then if he really wants to, again, try and get paid next year, even though he's a little bit older. I know he's in his mid-30s. Yeah. But, I mean, he was phenomenal. I think people forget how good Brooks Raley was for the Mets in 2023. One of the better left-handed relievers in terms of outcomes in that season.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now, but oh my God, his name pops up because I think he has pitched in Korea before, like with Korean leathers on Fangraphs, which scared the shit out of me for a second. I was like, did he go to the KBO? No. But in 2022 and 2023, it was a 2.60 ERA, a 2.80 ERA. It was strikeout rates over 25%. He's just a really, really, really good reliever. He's one of the most sturdy, dependable lefties in baseball. He's another guy I'd really welcome back. Another guy, a bit more of a reclamation project, but someone who I think could really benefit from what the Mets, Jeremy Hefner, and Eric Yeagers do. Adbert Alzolay, who was cut by the Cubs earlier this offseason. A Cubs team that desperately needs relief help. It seems like they just kind of quit trying to help him. The Matt Eddy, friend of the podcast, he focused on something a few weeks ago in a tweet that I think is really interesting of where the Mets pitching philosophy is going. And it was the fact that the Mets had, I think Eno Saris talked about this too in the Rates and Barrels podcast. Mets had the highest rate of pitchers on their roster last year through three different fastballs. And Alzolay has the four-seamer, the sinker, and the cutter, and still with a great slider. So I think he does things the Mets already like, and if they can just kind of tweak a little couple things here and there, still with the great slider, easily. A guy who 2 years ago was truthfully one of the most effective relievers in baseball 3 years ago. So that's something that I feel like could be a 1 for $5 million. And you look up in July, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe we got Adbert Alzolay for free.
I'm going to throw out some bigger names at you here that are available on the free agent market that Mets fans might be more familiar with. And you tell me whether or not you think there's an actual chance that they sign with the Mets. Okay. Kenley Jansen, do you even want him?
I definitely want him. Kenley Jansen is still good. Kenley Jansen has done incredibly to just stave off aging. Like his fastball velocity keeps dropping and his strikeout rate keeps going up. I don't know how he keeps doing it, but the guy's just a hoss. Like if you've ever seen Kenley Jansen pitch live, like it doesn't do justice how big he is when you watch him on television.
I went to spring training back in 2019, and I was in the Dodgers clubhouse at spring training. And Kenley Jansen was walking around, and we were with my friend Healy, who's 6'5", huge human, like built like a football player. The guy's massive, and he stood next to Kenley Jansen, who's listed as similar height and weight. Kenley Jansen had like 3 inches and like 60 pounds on him. The dude is a mammoth human being. He is a mountain of a man. If you hit him with your car is gonna like absolutely crumble, and he'd walk away just fine.
But like Kenley Jansen, he still just throws wicked colors all the time. And he did this last year in Fenway Park, where he was still getting the strikeout was still almost 30%. It's fallen below 30% the last few years, spiked back up last year. But you get him in a place like Citi Field with good defense behind him, Francisco Lindor, scooping up ground balls. Like I think Kenley Jansen can be still easily one of the 20, 30, 40 best relievers in baseball. And he seemed to kind of like the Mets vibe last year. He was rocking the OMG shirt.
Like while he's playing them, which is insane. He had some weird stuff going on in Boston, like when he just left. The season ended for them. They couldn't make the playoffs. Like, all right, I'm out. And they just let him go. It was so weird.
And he's the kind of guy who I feel like the fact that you have Juan Soto, he'd be much more willing to come and play for your team for 1 year for not very much money.
The one thing I will say is that he's like been on interviews I've seen from like the Bat Boys and stuff on TikTok and Instagram where they talk about like he just wants to play for the Dodgers. All he talks about is the Dodgers. He talks about that's his favorite place to play. He hopes he can end his career with the Dodgers. All he wants to do is play for them. And I thought that was also weird when he was playing for the Red Sox, who were still competitive at some point last year.
Yeah, and the other thing about Kenley Jansen is he's never not closed. So I'm not sure if he's willing to not close, but I think when you have a guy like Edwin Diaz, who everyone knows is the closer, that's going to be the guy. But I know the Blue Jays have had contact with him. I don't think the Red Sox or Dodgers have been linked with him this offseason. He also had a shoulder thing at the end of the year, which I think, again, might have been a little fabricated because he just kind of wanted to leave, it seems like. But I think if Kenley Jansen was willing to be a setup man, I would welcome him with open arms.
What about Kirby Yates? Because he's another guy who age will not catch up to him, it seems like. He had one of the best seasons of his entire career last year. He was phenomenal. An ERA at like 1.1, and I think he struck out 33% of the batters he faced. He was crazy good.
Yates was legit one of the best relievers in baseball last year. Like, you can't luck your way into a 1.17 ERA and a 0. And where's the whip? The whip was incredible.
Aaron Luke
too.
did, but yeah.
A 0.83 whip, but not in the ninth inning against hitters from both sides of the plate. Like, Aaron Luke was one of the last like fake lefty good relievers, but Kirby Yates was sensational last year. I saw Lance Prasdowski do a breakdown of him on WGN, the Cubs network, where it's just talking about how he was much more precise with his fastball command this past year. He stopped trying to let the fastball kind of beat guys, was just kind of like, I have to put this thing on the black. And he was able to do that really well. Then the splitter playing off it was still an incredible pitch. Again, I just think Kirby Yates kind of priced himself out of the Mets. I think Kirby Yates was so good last year, even though despite the fact he's 37 years old, like, he probably should get a multi-year deal to be a closer. He was just one of the most valuable closers in baseball. Like, that's probably just not one that the Mets will be in on. But if he wants to sign a 2-year deal for not that much money and not be a closer, like, sure, that works for me. But I just don't know if he's in the Mets price range anymore.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, he should be a closer on a competitive team. He shouldn't have
he's
to
fucking
be
he's fucking good.
Yeah.
He's legitimately good as shit. Like, he's great.
What else? Who else were we thinking of that could be a big name here? Ooh, okay, I got one for you. Lefty market. AJ Minter. I think he's got Tommy John, right? So I think, is he going to be done for the year? Is that one of those?
I'll double check right now. I thought Minter was one that I was going to put his name on the list and you were going to scream at me for.
Well,
but
I'm the reason I don't scream is because, like, we know the stuff that Minter has is good. The problem with him, and it's always been the problem with him, he seems like he's a head case. New York might not be a good place for him because he had some moments where he was going through it and he couldn't get out. Like, he was mentally out of it. He's talked about how mentally there were hardships for him. So I don't know if New York's a good mix there.
Sure, but also maybe we just give him some actual good, pitching foundation, some people around him. But Minter didn't have an elbow injury last year. It was a hip thing that knocked him out for the year. Okay. So I don't know the status on that. It seems like he probably still wants to go back to the Braves. But as a lefty with that color, like, I'll never say no to AJ Minter.
AJ Minter's good. Jose Leclerc.
I won't quit Jose Leclerc.
Right?
Dude, he throws too much gas. Like, Jose Leclerc has one monster season in him. I don't know where it's going to be and I don't know when it's going to happen, but there's one legit season for Jose Leclerc that's going to come in the future. Again, I don't know where, I don't know how, I don't know why, but it's going to happen.
No, I'm glad you said that. He's someone who, like, I feel like Mets fans, you go back like 3-4 years, they're like, Jose Leclerc, man. Like, is this going to be our Starling Marte? Like, we finally got him. It just might be maybe a little bit too late. Okay, last guy, big name here, future Hall of Famer, Craig Kimbrell. Do you even want to touch him with a 10-foot pole? Because I do not.
I don't really think so either. Like, I know the curveball is still amazing, but last year his fastball velocity fell to below league average. It was about 93 miles an hour, even a tick below at times. Like, if he can't sit 94, 95, I don't know that his command is terrible. It's never been good, but he's just stuff was so good the command never really mattered. Now the fact that he might actually have to place that fastball, and I still don't know if he can or if he even really wants to. Like, that could just be, that could be one that's just might be a disaster. If the Mets did sign Craig Kimbrell for like 1 year, $3 million, I don't think I'd be pissed. Yeah. But I think I would also really need to. They would really need to have a plan for him.
All right, well, this is the reliever episode. Give us some of your crazy names now.
All right, I mean, crazy names here. I like Austin Voth a lot. He's got a cutter sweeper and a curve. Like, that's just a gross one, but he'll be freed. I think he's decent. Danny Coulombe, I think he's got 3 different fastballs. Coulombe, we know the Mets love that. He's got the sweeper and the curve. Just a lefty with a lot of junk. I mentioned Tim Hill before. Tim Hill's fun. A lot of Mets fans are talking about Scott Barlow. Scott Barlow's fastball fully fell apart last year. It felt like barely 91 miles an hour.
Yeah, didn't know that.
And he has 2 good breakers, but he's basically like the exact same thing as Phil Maton in my mind at this point. Like, those two are the same. I see one, I see both. So I think that if you like one, I'm down if you like both. If you don't like Maton, I don't know how you can like Barlow besides the name. But Dylan Tate's fallen off really hard too. The sinkers might not be there anymore for him. I like John Brebbia at the trade deadline. He's got a lot of zip on that fastball. I think there's a chance for like $1 million. Like, he could be worthwhile. Tommy Kahnle, I don't know. Like, it's cool. I know he loves being a Yankee, but
yeah,
if he wants to stay in New York.
He's an interesting one where I have been in Discord calls late at night with Tommy Canley. Weirdly, he's a huge fan of one of my friends, Bengal. So like he would just like kind of get hammered and then join a Discord call and talk to us, which is kind of funny. He's a great dude. I just think he loves playing for the Yankees too much. Where like I think he's like, I only want to play for the Yankees and Dodgers the rest of my career. Maybe the Mets, like to be fair, when these conversations happened, the Mets were a lot different than the Mets are now and perceived, and the roster and the quality of players. So maybe Tommy Canley could be interested. He's really good. I'd love him on the team. It'd be great. Probably get Tommy Canley on the podcast because he's a nice dude. He's very friendly, but I just don't see him leaving the Yankees. And I don't know why the Yankees wouldn't bring him back. He's not going to cost anything.
Would also just be cool if we could make him throw a second pitch. I think a second pitch for Tommy Canley would be amazing.
Not just, what do you throw, like 35 straight changeups last year or something?
Yeah, in the World Series, I think it was 35 straight changes. So if that can happen. Another guy, this one is really gross. Shelby Miller has kind of gotten some stuff back as a reliever the last few years. His whip last year was under 1, but his ERA was over 4.5, which is a weird thing. That tells me, it's a strange thing that he doesn't really walk anybody. But there's a lot of balls in play, and like so he throws, he's really developed a good fastball. A lot, it was decent IVB, so I think a lot of it just got hit hard. So he played to a bad BABIP, which he should have played to a bad BABIP. He deserved a bad BABIP. He actually had a low BABIP. Why was his whip so high? And he didn't give up that many home runs either.
What the?
Weird. His left on base rate was so far below league average. So I think there might be like a smidge of upside in Shelby Miller just with a fastball has some good hop on it. Lucas Sims, his sweeper used to be like the best pitch in the league. I think you could still probably some fruit in those loins. You could juice that out. Joe Kelly still throws in the upper 90s. Like I know he's kind of a head case. I don't think he's ever going to leave LA. So I think that's something.
He's either going to be Dodgers or Red Sox. I think those are the only two places he wants to play.
And respect to him for that. Yeah, people have to have standards these days. But Kyle Finnegan, he's got ninth inning experience. His stuff is not very good, but I think he's someone that can easily be like as good as Reed Garrett, Danielle Nunes for probably less than $10 million for 1 year. A lot of people are talking about James Karinchak. I don't have much faith in him after the sticky stuff from a few years ago.
The grease on the back of his hair after every pitch, you take off his hat and put his hands through his hair, and then all of a sudden he had record-breaking spin rates. I mean, the Guardians have not used him since the sticky stuff has disappeared. I think we know what the entire catalyst was for James Karinchak's career.
Sure, but also the stuff still isn't bad even without the sticky stuff. It's definitely not as good, but he still has a 95-mile-an-hour fastball, has good hop on it.
Sure,
so there probably is something in James Karinchak, but I think also seems to be a bit of a head case as well. So I don't know if he
a major like I'm not listening to any of the COVID rules, right? And I'm gonna just do whatever the fuck I want.
Yeah, and it seems like also he kind of really fell out of faith with that like Cleveland team who has great pitching development. I always have. So I think again we just dropped like 20-ish names on you guys for pitchers who are even currently free agents, and there's still at least 3 or 4 guys who I think could easily be like legit pieces of the back end of the Mets bullpen. Another handful of guys who I think could easily mix in well in the Mets middle relief this season.
Oh, 100%. And then if you look at the trade market's not as robust on the reliever side. It's hard to think about trading for relievers before the season starts. You kind of have to look at roster crunches, guys who are out of options, and guys that are on bad teams with expiring contracts that maybe want to cash in. Some big names that you might know, and I'm going to say big names in really big quotation marks, big names here.
Those are big names.
P. Fairbanks is a big name, to be fair. He is a really good closer. World Series experience. He has a team option, so he's expiring, but not really. But that team option, I'm sure the Rays would not like to have to accept and then trade. I think that he's probably on the move at some point this year, probably closer to the trade deadline. Emilio Pagan is a name that I think a lot of Mets fans know. I think Mets fans want him in years past. He's got $8 million due from the Cincinnati Reds this year in the bullpen, and I just don't think the Reds, like that $8 million could go towards a couple more players for them that I think would be more useful than Emilio Pagan, who's a middling reliever for them.
For sure. Pagan this year dealt with tricep injuries and a lat injury that knocked out most of his season, but he was still the stuff was still, I'm not going to say it was effective because the ERA and the whip were high, but
that's also pitching in Cincy. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. His stuff was really, really good when he was pitching. It's still a plus fastball. He has a splitter and he has a cutter. Like he's a guy who I think profiles well for what the Mets want as a righty who would have relatively platoon neutral splits.
Someone that I think could be in like the Maton Stanek category of like these just, again, middling relievers that aren't going to be your main guys getting big outs. Dennis Santana, former New York Met.
Legend.
We got to, if you look at this guy's baseball savant page last year, a lot of good red. He is under control until 2027 on the Pirates. Pirates are weird. You don't really have a clue of what they're doing. It seems like they're okay with figuring it out and hoping, just hoping that maybe the season goes well. Because they're not really trying to win, it seems like, but they're also not trying to lose. It's a confusing state. Maybe they cash in on Dennis Santana on a bullpen that's full of a lot of young arms and he has no options. And then the most interesting one of the two here, I think, is the Padres because they have a gluttony. Is that right? What's the word I'm
Not
looking
really.
for?
Gluttonous is like you like to indulge yourself.
They got a lot.
A glut.
A glut, just a glut. Yeah, I think
just a glut.
That's me. I don't know how to say words. They got a glut of left-handed relievers, and two of them are out of options and are due quite a bit of money. Wandy Peralta, Yuki Matsui. Which, I mean, I think we probably prefer the younger guy and Yuki Matsui, but I think both those guys should be available for this Padres team who's trying to shed some money.
Ironically, I was high on both of these guys going into last season. Yuki coming over from the MPB and Magic Wandy leaving the Yankees. Yuki just has a great mix of a good fastball, splitter, and a tight slider with a sweeper he throws off it. Like, the guy just has a lot of weapons that he can use. I think he's a very good reliever. He didn't have the best results at times last year with the Padres, but the stuff, I'm not going to tell you it jumps off the page, but it's really fucking good. It just doesn't seem that good because it's only 92-mile-an-hour fastball. It's kind of it's very similar to the Shota Imanaga as a reliever, which I think is kind of funny. But I think that profile will very much work in short stints. He's also he's 5'8". Like, he has such a weird low slot fastball that gets really good rise, even with terrible extension on it. He's a very interesting pitcher. And Magic Wandy just kind of he's like one of those weird
he's a vibes
lefties.
Guy. Yeah,
he's just kind of a weird lefty who, like, it's hard to explain really why Wandy Peralta always gets out of the jams, but he always winds up getting out of the jams because he's the Magic Wandy.
Yes, and then I'll name some guys that I put in the tier of controllable from dumb teams. Your boy Calvin Fauché. I got nothing on, but you like him.
I mean, sinker sweeper. He's the guy who just a lot of soft contact, keeps the ball in the yard.
Dude, I'm all about this year. Seth Halverson. I don't think there's a world where the Rockies trade any of these relievers that I mentioned because they're the Rockies. And again, this is controllable from dumb teams, one of the dumbest organizations in sports. Seth Halverson is this dude who pitched like 12 innings last year, throws 100 with a four-seam and a sinker, and has nasty, nasty stuff. I think it's splitter or slider. I don't remember what the third pitch is exactly, but he put up some crazy numbers that like not many relievers can compare to. Keep an eye out for Seth Halverson, even if you're just like baseball. Victor Vodnik, Justin Lawrence. I'll never give up on Justin Lawrence. He's destined to be a Met one day. Just such
Vodnik's awesome.
Yeah, and Vodnik we saw in Arizona AFL. Fall League. Yeah, when
2021.
What was Sully Matias? Was that the guy too that I was obsessed with at the time?
Yeah. Sully Matias. And Victor Vodnik was a Braves prospect at the time. He kind of jumped into the Rockies closer role last year and actually pitched as well as any Rockies closer basically could ever pitch. He gasses up to 101 miles an hour. He's disgusting. And
then the last name I'll mention, a name I legitimately really hadn't heard of, but just looking at guys who have got a year or two left of control, are cheap and on bad teams. Justin Anderson of the Chicago White Sox. Throws in the mid-90s, had a slider with a 41% whiff rate last year on the White Sox. I think that's an interesting player, and he has control until 2027. He's in his 30s. The White Sox are not competing. That feels like someone that you could maybe give like a more high upside, low floor prospect to the White Sox for, and have a reliever who could be a part of this bullpen for a couple seasons.
Yeah, I mean, last year they traded Tanner Banks to the trade deadline to the Phillies, if I'm not mistaken. I thought that was a weird thing because Banks also, I think, was a lefty who was decent, had good stuff. And had a lot
Anderson's
of team
a righty, but
Anderson's right. I thought Anderson was lefty. Never mind. Also, I mean, was I thinking of Fauché? No, Fauché's righty too. Also, I misspoke. Fauché's got the cutter and the curveball with a wild sinker and some sweepers. But I mean, there's just simply the thing that we want to get out of this episode for you guys is there are a lot of potentially available relievers in Major League Baseball. And it's hard to really be able to grasp who all of these guys are and how good they could possibly be, and if they're even available, because I think that comes into question too with a lot of these guys. But there's just tons of options, and we could be rest assured that David Stearns will not leave one single stone unturned in trying to build the best possible bullpen for this team before September.
One thing we haven't talked about too, the Mets have a bunch of starting pitchers that could be some decent relievers as well this year.
Yeah.
And I will never, and I don't think you will either, give up on the idea. What is it, James? Who do I think should become a reliever and I think could be nasty?
Tyler McGill.
McGill. 1
hour, I feel like he could be one of the best relievers in baseball. I'm not even fucking around.
Like, we saw what his brother did. Tyler McGill put him in a role where he just goes balls to the wall, one inning every couple days. He's probably throwing 97, 98 miles an hour. It feels like that is the home for him at the end of all this, where it's just like, dude, do you want to be a guy who's fighting to be the sixth starter every single year on a major league team, or do you want to lock up being a dominant reliever? And I think Tyler McGill could be that. I also think we've seen David Stearns teams do this in the past. They did it with Corbin Burns, Brandon Woodruff, and all those runs that they had. Brandon Sproat could come out of the bullpen at some point this year. Blake Tidwell could come out of the bullpen at some point. Dom Hamill, I think, is another name that could come out of the bullpen. Like, there are guys that definitely could be relief pitch options at some point for this Mets team, come up, make a couple spots. If Nolan McLean has a great year, I think there's a world you could see him come up as a reliever at some point. Like, this is a way for them to get their innings, but not stunt their growth by just sitting around and getting shelled because they're not ready to be starters yet.
I'm very confident that if Christian Scott was healthy at the end of last year, he would have been coming out of the bullpen down the stretch, September and October. I think that would have been something that happened. So I think if Brandon Sproat this is going to be a weird way to phrase this. If he's not good enough to cement himself in the rotation this summer, there's a really good chance he's good enough to cement himself in the bullpen this summer.
And that doesn't mean he's going to be a reliever moving forward. This is just how you kind of handle these guys.
It's kind of how you start, especially a guy like Sproat, who we know has such good off-speed pitches, and that fastball can get dialed up into the triple digits if he's pitching in 1-2 innings at a time. I also think McGill's at a weird spot with his service time, where he has 3 more years of a control for the Mets. There's a point where you can kind of get yourself the most valuable possible when you transition to being a reliever, as close to free agency as possible. Where if like Tyler McGill could be free agent 2 years with 3 years of being one of the most dominant relievers in baseball under his belt, some people would be like, oh, damn, let's go there. And also, the one guy, we don't want to mention him because we're very confident in his ability as a starter, but it's always possible. Clay Holmes could easily wind up slotting in to the 8th inning guy in his bullpen. Like, if the starting thing doesn't work out, we think it's going to work out. Really good. I think there's a lot of upside on it too. But of course, there's a chance it doesn't. By the middle of June, July, Clay Holmes could be one of the best setup men in baseball. Very
literally,
easily.
Yeah. Like, I think that's another thing we're all forgetting. Yeah, it's the contract would be great as a starting pitcher and be really good as a reliever.
It'd be fine as a reliever. It wouldn't be really good. It'd be good enough.
Yeah, it's good. It's good enough.
Yeah.
And one more trade. We got money.
And one more trade guy to mention. I think the Astros are going to really try and dump Ryan Presley. They just pay too many relievers too much money at this point.
You putting it out
and
there?
We know they can. We know they can really use an outfielder, and Starling Marte, we've heard, is available. So if Dana Brown's listened to this, I know he probably is. Pick up the phone, call David Stearns, try and make a deal.
No, David Stearns, we know, is listening. Maybe you call Dana Brown first and just float the idea. Like, think about Marte for Presley. Interested? Think that's a good deal?
I think Ryan Presley could really use a change of scenery right now after a bad season, and I truthfully think, could be one of the best relievers in baseball.
I'd take that. I'd sign up for that. Anything else here on the reliever market? That's how we're going to wrap it up.
I think we're good.
Also, shout out the Mets and Steve Cohen and David Stearns. Nobody in arbitration, I think, this year, again, which is huge.
Yeah, nobody. It's amazing. I went back and looked at it. Since Steve Cohen took over the team, we have settled with 46 of 48 arbitration-eligible players. The 2 guys we did not settle with, one was Phil Bickford, who was off the team months later.
Who cares?
And the other one was J.D. Davis, who we settled with him the next year. So we were good.
And if you guys don't know the importance of arbitration-player relationships, Foul Territory did an episode and they had Dylan Betances on, and he talked about how ugly arbitration got with the Yankees and it really left a bad taste in his mouth. This stuff matters. These guys are human beings at the end of the day, and when a billion-dollar organization is fighting over what are pennies essentially to these billionaire owners, it is not a good look ever.
No, and I wanted a lot of people, when I tweeted this, jumped in and said the Wilpons are also really good at this too. So tip the cap for the Wilpons for doing one good thing there. But that was just
crazy. People were fighting for them. That's insane. Who are these people?
People just mentioning it, I guess. People just like to be like, well, actually on Twitter. But before we send you guys out too, we have another message from Frankie Peppers.
We got Frankie Peppers. All right.
We got Frankie in this one.
All right, let me hear a little Frank.
Gentlemen, this is Frankie Peppers. How you doing? Gotta say, James, I was pretty on the money with that Pete Alonso contract last time. I was listening over some dinner, and I heard you drop what you thought Pete would be getting in free agency, and I said to myself, "Oh, that's what I said. He's gonna like that." And it turned out you liked that, so that's all well and good. I hope the new year's kicking off well for you boys. I hope you liked my bold predictions. I think I'll try and make more sometimes, but sometimes I can't be too bold about things. Sometimes I gotta let things, just sort of play out as they should. I've taken a little break from bolognese. My doctor said that maybe I shouldn't be having it every day. So if Pete Alonso doesn't sign in the next few days, I might make some more just to try and jimmy up some support for him. But right now I'm making this spiced chicken for salad tonight instead. More heart healthy. But I hope you boys are having a good new year. I'll talk to you soon. I appreciate it. Take care, boys.
New year, new Frankie. We love that.
Bringing the heat, as always, literally. Bringing the heat with the spicy chicken for the salad. That's it for this episode, guys. Thank you so much for listening and watching. Make sure you follow us on all our social media at Mets'd on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Subscribe to the Mets'd Podcast YouTube channel if you want to see the video version of this. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, wherever you get your podcasts, you can find us. Make sure you download, subscribe, drop us a review, give us a rating as well. You can follow James on Twitter at
James_Shiano.
And I'm Draftnik Mark with a C. Thank you all for listening and watching. Happy New Year again. In case this is the first one you're watching of the new year, Happy New Year. Can't do it anymore. It's too late now. We're going 2 weeks. It's over. That's it. Don't say it again. And let's fucking go Mets.
Let's fucking go Mets. See you guys next time. Thanks for listening.